Good evening, everybody. Everyone hear me okay? Stop the screen share here. Right. Welcome to Monday's live stream, everybody. As we welcome everyone coming on in, give it another second here. Start a little early today. So thank you, Michael. We're loud and clear on Facebook. I see our invitees coming in on Zoom here. So we're going to get started here in just 1 second. Just getting everything set up. So the chat is open on Facebook. The webinar chat is open on Zoom. So please ask questions. All right. Welcome back. We are 9 weeks away from the start of AP exam season. I am Joe Sebastian. I founded the group Athletes in AP History, started the group to help athletes and busy student athletes succeed on their AP exams. And it's not just for AP History. We also do AP Government and AP Human Geography. But I ran a poll in the group. We're now closing in on 900 group members. So by next week at this time, we probably will have crossed 1,000. So really excited about that. And that'll be 8 weeks away. So really excited to get started about DBQ secrets, because we did run a poll in the group this past week asking which FRQ should we start with and talk through. And this is probably going to be part 1 of a multi-part series talking about some tips and tricks for the different FRQs. But we're going to start with the DBQ. And if you excuse me, I'm still battling a cold. My voice is not where it should be. I have a very, very sore throat, so might be popping a cough drop every now and then. But I'm going to try to get through this and hopefully give you some value tonight on why I think the DBQ should be probably the essay that students look forward to the most on the AP History exam, because even though it's worth a lot, it's actually not that quite hard to unlock its secrets. So let's dive in. So for those that don't know, the document-based question, that is what the DBQ stands for. It is worth 25% of your exam. So of your exam score on the AP History. That includes AP US, AP World, and AP European History. And it is the first part of section 2 of the FRQs. So the other part of that is going to be a long essay. You have an hour and 40 minutes for both these, but the DBQ you have an hour. And the recommended time is that you spend 15 minutes reading the documents. Again, it's worth 25% of your exam. And students are presented with 7 different documents, perspectives on historical developments or processes. Students assess these written documents, their quantitative or visual materials or historical evidence, and students develop an argument supported by analysis of historical evidence. And usually the topics range, in this case, this is the US History DBQ from 1754 to 1980. Usually it's that middle range, the majority of the content from one of the history courses. Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is the DBQ. Now, the beautiful thing about the DBQ is all the evidence is given to you in which you need to make an argument with. So keep that in mind as we go through this. This is the DBQ rubric. You will not find this on College Board's website because it is like 3 or 4 pages long. I broke it down to make it easier for most of our masterclass students to read it, and I can reference it really quickly when I evaluate their writing. But this is how I communicate with them the DBQ in terms of a 1-pager rubric. So it is worth 7 points. You get 1 point for a thesis or claim, which you must establish a line of reasoning with analytical categories. You get 1 point for contextualization, describing a broader historical context relevant to the problem. You get 3 points, and they're broken up like this. You get, if you use 6 of the documents, out of the 7 documents, you get 2 points. and you get an additional point for outside evidence. Altogether, that makes 3. So I always encourage everyone to use 7 documents. Excuse me. And then you get an additional point for analysis and reasoning using at least 3 of the documents, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, and or audience is relevant to the argument. And then the last point comes from complexity. And so complexity is actually really, really hard to get. And only about 2% of students actually score complexity, which means with 10 to 12% of students getting 5s on the exam, you can actually get a 5 without getting the 7 point of DBQ. The way I teach the DBQ is I'd say chase the 6 points before you chase the 7. The way I'm going to show you tonight to set up your DBQ will allow you to get to the 7th point, but I'm telling you that it is really, really hard to get. You really got to know what you're talking about. So because my voice is limited, I kind of pre-populated my template, but I'm going to show you the process and where I got it from, okay? And I'm not going to sit here and read the documents, but this template is actually a really good guide of how I teach it and how students should scaffold themselves in terms of writing. Excuse me while I put a cough drop in. Okay, so when students get to this part of the exam, they have already written their SAQs. They're writing it in like a blue book, or like it's like a book they have blank paper and line paper on to write. When they read the documents, or when they get time ready to do the DBQ, I strongly encourage them to write an example like this down. It doesn't be as detailed as table, but I teach them this, and then obviously on the test, they can remember what to do. Most important thing is write down numbers 1 through 7. Leave a little space. So 1 through 7, and then I say OE at the bottom for outside evidence. This is going to help us annotate the documents as we read them. I really only want to read the documents one time, because even though we have an hour, it flies by. And even though they say 15 minutes to plan, I actually encourage students to use 20 to 25 minutes to plan, because if you get this template right, all these boxes filled in correctly, and you have a strong thesis, your essay actually writes itself. And I'll show you that in a second. So the question we're using is the 2019 FRQ from AP US History tonight. Okay. This is exactly what the FRQs look like on the exam. This is it. You have this page here. Evaluate the extent to which the progressive movement fostered political change in the United States from 1890 to 1920. Before I even read the documents, I'm writing that question down. What does that mean? Evaluate. That's the action verb. And then the extent to which the progressive movement fostered political change. So the easiest way to write this essay is to at least agree with that the progressive movement fostered some political change, but it's the extent. It may have done a little bit, it may have done a lot, or it may have done somewhere in between. So we're going to try to figure out what this is leading us to write with, because that's that last category on the right, categories. Right now, I'm not making a social, political, economic argument. It's going to be all political. I got to find in what ways it fostered political change. So what were the key ideas of fostering political change? That's what I'm going to get from the documents. Now, again, I'm bypassing a lot of this. We would go through the documents one by one, read them, and talk about them. So, we open this up again. Here we go. So, these documents have to deal with various elements of the progressive movement. So, I've already pre-filled out the summary. Now, I'm not restating what the document says. I'm summarizing the content to show how this document answers the question. That is the most important thing about the annotation. So you can get everything else kind of wrong. You got to get this right. You have to make your annotation and your summarizing the documents actionable, because that is going to eventually go into your essay. So document 1 describes a political campaign by social reformers against a local official or machine politics, right? So that's talking about someone who, in this case, was Jane Addams, calling out the political machine in New York City. That's her point of view. She's trying to advocate for political reforms. And by the way, you only did this 3 times. That's why I did this 3 times on the right here. And I think point of view, purpose, usually the easiest one to get. So document 2, again, argues that the large corporations trust to be regulated by governments. That was a speech from Teddy Roosevelt down here. And document 3 argues courts have the responsibility to help juvenile offenders and neglected children. Document 4 advocates for initiative, referendum, and recall. Document 5, protest for racial segregation in federal government employment under the Wilson administration. Document 6 promotes efficiency in police work. And document 7 is a cartoon contrasting a brewer urging people to vote wet or dry for my sake, with a woman surrounded by 3 children urging people to vote dry for mine. Those are the summaries of the documents. So if we did that in real time, take about 15, 20 minutes for the test. We then have the point of view over here, which we're going to add in later. And then we have to think of a piece of outside evidence. You don't necessarily have to do this right here. It might come when you start writing your paragraphs, but you do got to remember to put that in there to get that extra point. So now we're going to kind of do 2 things at the same time. We have to weigh the evidence we just read, and we have to kind of think of how are we going to form out a thesis to answer this question. So that's now part 2. We're going to take this information and try to make a thesis and maybe come up with some analytical categories here. Now, I already wrote the thesis just to do in the interest of time. So if you read the documents, there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. Because we want to try to get the complexity point, we should try to make ourselves set up for a complex thesis. One of the ways you do that is you start out the thesis in a particular way. You can directly answer the question, you'll get the majority of the points. So you could just say the progressive era foster political change in this way, in this way, in this way. That's fine, but it's not a complex thesis. So a complex thesis is not going to get you a complexity point. The only chance you have is to make an argument and a counter argument. So one thing when you read the documents, there's this one document in here that sometimes you don't have to use 7, right? You might not use this document, but not everything was great during the progressive era. In this letter from the NAACP to Woodrow Wilson, it basically talks about how African Americans were facing racial segregation under his administration during the progressive era. So the progressive era was doing a lot of different changes, but African Americans were kind of left out of this. And this was in the middle of the 1920s, or the early teens, before the 1920s. So we know that segregation was still going on in the South, and apparently there was racial segregation going on in the federal government. So the way I'm thinking about it is, okay, that's a point I can talk about. Now I'm going to have to bring some outside evidence in for that paragraph. And honestly, it's probably not going to be a long paragraph because I only have one document to support it. Maybe I can integrate another document. But I strongly recommend you using the words despite or although to start your thesis. So I went with, despite its failures to extend democratic rights to African Americans, the progressive movement achieved its goals of improving society and protecting workers. So that's my thesis. So all the documents kind of support that except this one, which is about African Americans. Now, what other outside evidence can we talk about? We don't want to get too off track. We want to make sure we can make a concise argument because that's only one piece of evidence in our first body paragraph. So we could talk about W.E.B. Du Bois or other reformers at this time, use them in a way in how they advocated for reform and ending segregation for there, and that would actually be enough to probably write a paragraph. So what we do once we have our thesis here I literally just tell them to copy this down here for our assertion. So my body paragraph 1 is going to start with, and now I have to reword this because it's not going to make sense unless I reword it. The progressive era, so I would say the progressive era failed to extend democratic rights to African Americans, period. That's my starting sentence for my body paragraph. My starting sentence for paragraph 2 is the progressive movement achieved its goals of improving society and protecting workers. Now, we said document 5 is going to go here. Again, you're not going to have this nice outline on your test, but we start with this and then we take it away. So you need to include document 5 here, and we know we're going to include our outside evidence here. That means document 1, document 2, document 3, document 4, document 6, and document 7 are all going to go there for our evidence with a connection. Now comes the tricky part. How do you write this, right? Well, we already just already argued this. We already wrote a summarizing the content. How does this answer the question? So, and again, very, very surface level stuff, but I'm going to reuse what I just wrote, and I'm going to try to find a way to reword it. So the progressive era failed to extend democratic rights to African Americans. In Washington, D.C., many African Americans working for the federal government protested racial segregation under the Wilson administration. Document 5, boom. So, and then that's the proof. That's me using the document as evidence. And then I have to add some analysis. So despite the political advances President Wilson was arguing for, African did not part conversation as the federal workforce was still segregated. And that's how you use the evidence and you explain it. Now, down here with some of our stuff we outlined, I will have to bring in point of view to get that point. But you could probably see that it starts to write itself if you know the context. So how do you get the context point? What I recommend is writing 4 sentences, 1, 2, 3, 4, background on this era, like what led up to the progressive movement. So you could talk about the Gilded Age, you could talk about Industrial Revolution, you could talk about the wealth divide, you could talk about segregation in the South. There's a lot of different things you could talk about, but you don't need to spend all day about it, but just a couple sentences getting us to our thesis. And then it kind of unfolds naturally. So if you follow this formula, you have a well-written essay. That's honestly the best way to start it and then unfold it. So you literally just bring these documents down into your paper, or use them as you're writing. Obviously, you're going to have your notes on the side or scrap paper, but you're going to build it and integrate it into just like that. So the next sentence starts with the progressive movement achieved its goals of improving society and protecting workers. So document 1 talks about social reform at the political level. So we're going to have to come up with an intro or a second sentence that kind of leads us to why that happened, and then explain document one. But that's basically how you integrate it. And if you do those, so like I said, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling a lot right now, but the DBQ rubric right here. So we have the point for thesis, right? That's our thesis point. If we did the 4 sentences, we get the context point, we get that. If we use 6 documents, we get the point, or sorry, we get 2 points. And if we use outside evidence, so we brought in the WDB Du Bois, we get an additional point. And then as long as we're using the analysis and showing point of views, purpose, situation, we get a point there. That's 6 out of 7. Complexity is honestly going to come from how we integrate the counter narrative throughout the entire essay. That is really the only way you get that complexity point. So again, easier said than done, but I'm going to show you some sample DBQ responses. And this is all free on College Board that you can start seeing. So they give you the rubric. They give you examples that would earn the point for the thesis. They give you examples of context that might be included. Things we talk about. Here's evidence from the documents. And then they show you examples of demonstrating a complex understanding. So again, you got to use the documents, but then you got to explain nuances and similarities or connections. It is complicated, but it can be done. You got to explain the point of view, situation, and then if you scroll down here, it shows you some acceptable theses, I should say. So like this example suggests a historically defensive line of argument development establishes the main analytical categories of the responses, including a counter argument. You have that example there. There's a couple other ones. There's also like usually the minimally acceptable thesis. They have examples of unacceptable thesis, right? So just restating the prompt is not going to get you. Not establishing a line of reasoning is not going to get you the point. Being too vague is not going to give you a point. Context, we talk about industrialization. It shows you quotes from people's writing that got that there. It shows you misaligned contextualization. And then it shows you how you use the evidence and supporting the argument. And then it kind of shows you how it's scoring. Now, the cool thing about using the released FRQs, at least when I teach with it, is showing the high, middle, and low exemplars. This shows you what a 7 looks like on the DBQ. So you can read through this and see the quality of writing. And it's not always the neatest writing, but it's have all the points. I'm sorry if you can hear my children screaming. It is bath time in the Sebastian house right now. So, but what's cool about this is they show you a high, a middle, a low, and then they scroll down even further and they show why they scored it. So that one, sample 1A got a 7, shows you why you got the points. 1B got 5, shows you why and where they lost points. And sample 3 got, or 1C got a 2. So hopefully that kind of demystified the DBQ. What questions do you all have when it comes to the DBQ that I didn't address, or more points of clarification to help you? Because remember, this is 25% of your exam score. What can I help you with? Any questions on Facebook? Any questions on, we have a question in Zoom. Will I go over this in masterclass? Yes, I will. Yes, definitely. Multiple trainings on the DBQ in masterclass where we kind of go in even in more detail. Thank you for the question. Any additional questions? Thoughts on the template? Would anyone like a copy of the template? I'll give that away tonight. Blank copy of the template. The template, the writing guide right here is this with that. Thanks, Jen. Okay. Well, again, this is probably part one. We're going to go over all the FRQs. Another question. Got it. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hope I feel better. So everyone on the live stream, if you want a copy, what I want you to do right now, just so I know, I know you're answering right now, but I do lose the Q&A when I shut off the Zoom. Send me a message on Facebook Messenger. And I will get it back to you. I'll give you a link that you'll be able to make your copy in Google Docs that is editable. Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So hopefully this helped everyone tonight. Just a little plug. We are still enrolling students in our master class. We are 8 weeks out or 9 weeks out from the exam. So there's still plenty of time to do a very thorough review and help you get a 5. The master class is our one-on-one test prep coaching program. We've had a lot of students sign up in the last couple of weeks. Really looking forward to continue to work with them. But if you need help with test preparation and want a proven system to get you in line for a 5, to get you 100% ready for the exam, reach out to me. I can send you a link and we can talk about what it looks like for you. So thank you all for attending. Again, just send me a quick message or a comment on the Facebook and I will get you a copy over to you shortly. Keith, I see you as well. I'll get you a copy as well. Thank you all for attending tonight. I hope to see you next week when we'll go over another FRQ. Have a good night, everybody.